Good evening. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Board of Finance for Monday, May 20th, 2019 order. First item on the agenda, as usual, is public forum. Anybody wishing to address the board in public forum? Okay. Item number 2, approved minutes. Regular meeting of April 15th, 2019. Our regular meeting, Board of Finance. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Corrections? I don't think I had any. No.
I had one.
Go ahead, Jeff.
On page 2.
Yep.
Item 4. And it's just to add a word that I think just makes it clear. Dr. Hirsch went over the various accounts that are over and under budget. I just put that in there.
Okay. Any others? Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Okay, Ken and John abstain. Okay. I know this is after the fact, but did you have any issues on the regular meeting minutes?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica, for running an errand for us. I very much appreciate that. So we have all of our material tonight. Item number 3, correspondence standing building committee minutes. These are the minutes of May 7th. Does anybody have any questions or comments that would technically at some point get back to the building committee liaison?
I have.
Go ahead, Ken.
On item 5 was raised the issue of performance contracting. Is it still too early to get any indication as to whether that is working, whether it is working with efficiencies as projected?
Well,
I guess I'm directing this to the board.
yeah, there was, it'll come up, I think, during the Board of Education portion. There was something in the meeting minutes that it's my anticipation that it's still a little bit early on the results of that, but there was a comment that, and I'll find it during our meeting, that the performance contracting report or the results at this point are, the numbers aren't quite what were expected. But I do know that there were also certain things that were not online yet. And so the project is not complete. So until it's complete, you really can't get a good read. But I did see something in there that I wanted to call attention to because it sounds like, oh, we're not meeting the requirements, but it's still early. And and Cliff Gurnham, who would know that better. I think to go to your question, Ken, more so, and I agree, it would be nice to be able to maybe get a quarterly, when those reports are in, just so that we know how the contracting's doing based on the money we spent. But if you have any more on that, that'd be great.
Well, we did meet with JCI and ECG at our last operations committee, so you will see some more detail in the next set of minutes coming to you. But I am happy to speak about it if you'd like us to speak about it now or later.
We could speak on it later because I think that's when I'll bring it up.
Sure.
Yeah, and I can't remember which meeting minutes it was, but Cliff did address that particular.
We have a little more information. I think I know what you're addressing, and we do have a little more we can share with you tonight.
It'll be helpful if I did that. Yeah. Anything else on building committee?
I had one other point, which was, I guess it goes to the efficiencies, but item 9, the HVAC upgrades at Baldwin, it was agreed that the schedule is challenging. The project will need to extend into the school year, probably into October. And my question is whether this will affect instruction in any way, or whether school can proceed with minimum interference while the contractors do their thing.
It should not interfere. A number of our projects, most recently and probably most obviously to everyone, was the window project at Adams. A number of them are difficult to complete over summer, and so it's not unusual for a project to overlap the beginning of the school year. And we'll work afternoons and weekends and do the best we can. So students might see some work, but it won't.
It won't
impact
interfere.
Construction.
It's a good time of season. Usually September into October is usually
We're
doable.
bumping up a lot of projects during that.
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, especially
May- May
HVAC, you can
school
get
years.
away with it. If you get into November, that's, when you get November, December, then you've got issues, but, yeah, I saw that too, and at first I was concerned, I thought September, October are usually pretty good months to be able to get that done, and it is, it's a challenging project to get done, the HVAC. There's a
Yes,
lot of
this one in
infrastructure
particular.
up in the ceilings and everything, so, okay. Anything else?
The
Jeff?
HVAC up at Melissa Jones, item 8 on the minutes, has that gone out to bid, or it looked like it was just getting ready to go out to bid?
The documents are prepared, and we're working to get those out as quickly as possible.
Is the hope to get started this summer?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's, let's see, this was May, right? So.
May 7th, yeah.
Yeah, 100% complete plans and schedule at the next meeting, and the anticipation to get out to bid.
Right. It's a much smaller project.
Yeah. Correct.
And what's the issue with, there was, in the minutes, it said there's an 8-foot fence, or a fence around as a noise barrier. I don't, and it was a narrow area that they seemed to be able to work within.
The minutes, you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in that item 8.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, is
it's-
that the Jones or at?
This is at Jones.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to defer to
Okay.
clarify, I apologize.
It says a chiller location and the 8-foot-high fence are now indicated on the plans.
Oh, so, yeah, the chiller does sit just sort of outside the gymnasium. If you were going around back to enter the gymnasium, as we do for voting, the chiller is in sort of a hill with a stairwell to nowhere that wraps around it, and there is new fencing that goes around it. So I think they're just talking about the tight area they have to work in.
Okay.
But I'd have to check with Cliff.
It's not like it's up against the property line or anything
No,
like that?
no. It's
Yeah.
all internal to our property, but the chiller is fenced off to keep students and
Away from it.
community away from it. So I think it's just a tight space that they were discussing.
Great, thank you.
But the Melissa Jones project should be completed by the time school reopens.
So the goal is to have all of them complete before the students return, but it's not unusual to have some, or in some years, all of the projects extend into the first few days of the school year. And again, we'll focus on weekends and after hours to complete them, so it's so that we minimize any disruption.
Right. I think we'll know more next month. We'll see the schedule probably from the June building committee. Anything further?
Sound right.
Okay. Pension committee minutes, April 17th.
I got a question, Mike.
Jonathan?
So I was just reading some of the minutes, and it looked like the sergeant of the police was going over some changes to the amendments, right, to the police retirement? And it seemed like he had a concern with language in one of the amendments, and I just wonder if there's any detail on, what the issue might have been.
It was premature. The director of HR had informed, there's a police contract that's been amended 11 times. And in order to address anything, they always have to go through an amendment to get back to the basic agreement. So the desire was to update that core agreement to incorporate all the 11 amendments over time. When the head of HR informed the police union that he was going to inform the pension committee that this was something they'd like to do, the police union felt that we were going to take action on that morning, and we weren't. So we came in kind of with the wrong agenda. So there was nothing to do with it, and of course it will now all work through the lawyers to get this all done. And we reassured the police union that all the lawyering the bills will be footed by the town of Guilford, not by the police. And that was it.
Okay, yeah, I could see by the minutes that they just were concerned because they wanted to go through it, but I thought they had some specific issue with one of the
They were
language on
worried
one of
about
the
timing,
amendments.
but they didn't understand that on the morning there was no action to be taken. And they were afraid that something hadn't been negotiated prior to that meeting that didn't need to be.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Anything else in the minutes?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken.
Item 7, Bob, on the investment advisors,
Yes.
that's not expected to close, the minutes say, until the third quarter. and there is gathering information to assess the impact on Guilford. What could the impact be of that movement from Wells Fargo?
You always, the simple concern was that the portfolio shift from one set of hands to another would go without incident, and it has, and it's been completed, so we're okay.
No problem.
No problem. And the only other thing to mention is that we have now gone out to RFP for actuaries. We've heard from everybody who, we've interviewed everybody we're going to look at, and subject to a fee arrangement, we've made up our mind and we'll make a recommendation in time for the Monday morning meeting of the Board of Selectmen. And it does include a substantial reduction in fees, I'm pleased to say.
And that will all be discussed on Wednesday morning at your meeting, which we are totally welcome to attend.
Please, by all means.
I know how that spiel goes now, so, thank you. Anything else?
Drink coffee
Good.
and donuts, though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, bring
right.
your own.
Yeah, that's what the newbies bring, right?
We got none.
Thanks.
All that investment?
We're cheap.
It belongs to the pensioners.
Any other reports? No. Okay. Great. Item number 4, review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for April 2019. Dr. Freeman, Board Member Mary Best, filling in for the illustrious Linda Trudeau today.
Yeah, you get the pinch hitter, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's you?
Yes.
That's all right, Mary's next to you, so you're good. You're covered.
All right. So expenditures for the month of April were $4,470,625.36. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of April were 79.18% of the budget, as compared to 75.78% in the prior year. Revenue for April 2019 was $20,941.55, which included $20,685.55 from Medicaid and $96 donation from Aetna and $160 fee from the pre-K tuition dollars. The only other thing to mention, we are expecting a balance of the ECG grant to come in at the end of May, which could produce additional revenue.
Okay.
I'm happy to discuss any questions you may have on the warrants.
I just wanted to add that we also received a memo on May 13th from Linda regarding an update on the projections.
Okay.
So we are in receipt of that from Linda,
Okay.
which I'm sure we'll probably have a little bit of discussion on that this evening as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. With that, question, Kat?
Yeah, Linda, in
Kick it
her
off.
very useful cover letter, which we alluded to the fact that transportation is higher than the prior year. Is there, can you fill us in on that as to why that's the case?
It's primarily related to special education transportation costs. So in years when you see that we tend to trend over budget for tuition, it will likely be that we will also trend over budget for transportation as those students need to get to those outplacements, Ken. So those two often travel together.
And then
track together.
there was some additional cost for Our Lady of Mercy transportation costs, which is also temporary.
Right, we absorb.
Is that all behind us now?
It should be,
It
yes.
will be, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the figure of $85,000 in there.
It was a
That's
one.
in part, yeah.
Yep, it was just the 1 year. We don't expect to have any
Right.
costs
But the
associated
portion of
with
Our
that.
Lady of Mercy was not the full 82.
I don't
Or
think so.
85, it was.
85, I think.
It says due in part to the cost.
Due in
from
part, yeah.
I
Our Lady
believe
of
it was
Mercy.
approximately 60,000 of that was related.
It wasn't all of it, but, because I remember it being 85 when we talked about it
No,
earlier
it
in
was a
the year.
significant piece. They had their 4th through 8th graders housed in Guilford, therefore we were responsible for transportation for any of their students who have a Guilford residence. Next year, when they return their location to Madison,
Right.
those students will likely continue to attend, but we would no longer be responsible for the cost of transportation.
Okay.
And I saw it's getting a little bit ahead of the game, but I saw in the warrants that we had about $23,000 item for special ed and transportation. Just one item.
That's going to be dependent on the billing cycle, so that's going to depend on who that vendor is and whether they're billing for a month or for multiple, it's going to depend on the billing cycle, and I apologize, Linda would be able to speak in more detail than I will about that.
So, I mean, I do want to discuss where we are with this. I think this is a really good memo that was put together by Linda telling us, and I think it's good for the audience to hear too. Just so that we know this because we've read it, but there were, and if those that are not necessarily keeping up to speed on the Board of Education meetings on GCTV, there were 2 transfers that were made. There was 300 from the salaries to tuition, and there was 100 that came from, making sure that I got it right, it came from supplies and material.
Into
Right.
tuition as well.
So 100,000 went in, so 400,000 was put into tuition.
300 from salary.
300 from salary, 100 from supplies and materials. So what we're seeing is that there's a number of, salaries is slightly under budget. When I say slightly, we're in the, 72,000, employee benefits 52 under. Purchase services now is the big item, right? That's the 437,000.
Correct.
To call it 38 over budget. Which I noticed on that there are quite a few still encumbrances, which I know were left open for several reasons that they may need to still be spent, but there might still be cancellations on those. Tuition is now at 102 over budget, which is obviously better because of the transfers, but
Yep.
so what we've
We're
been
still
talking about
over
tuition
budget.
being 600 over, right, or 500 over, and now is shifted on this memo as now there's other line items that are over. Supplies and materials are under, capital is under, transportation is over, and we just talked about that. So, right now, we're looking at a deficit of the 344.
Correct.
So, when it comes right down to it, when there's encumbrances in this, let's see, under purchase services, about 327 on encumbrances, of course, that some of those will be realized.
Right.
That gets you closer to 0. But what are your? We've been chopping away at
Right.
that slowly. Where, at this particular moment, how much do you think it's going to get down, and do we think we're going to get to not much more? I know you can't give an
Yep.
exact number, but do you think we're going to get to half of that, or?
We're sitting at approximately 344,000 over budget today, and this is the worst that you should see. There are 2 significant pieces that we will track from now to the close of the budget at the end of June. The first is what you mentioned. At this point in the year, we will see encumbrances that end up not being spent out. We will have lines that are open purchase orders that end up not being spent completely. And so we will begin at this point to see what line items we're projecting to be fully spent out that will in fact come in slightly under budget. And we have asked principals to curtail spending to help in that effort. The second component, Dr. Best just mentioned, in that the end of May, we will get the final distribution of the excess cost grant. And this budget continues to maintain a fairly conservative expectation of what we will receive from excess cost.
72%.
I think we're at about 72%. And so if we receive slightly over that, you might see a slight improvement over that. And then finally, the last piece to make sure that this board is confident that we will not be coming in with a shortfall at the close of the school year, is that we would just remind you that in June, we are slated to make a $900,000 payment to the medical account. And the medical account is in significant surplus at this time. So the worst case scenario would be that if this number does not move at all, instead of making a $900,000 payment, we would make a $900,000 payment minus $344,000. I don't know at this time, Mr. Ailes, that we will work the 344 down to 0, but I think that we would reduce it significantly. You mentioned, would it be half of what it is?
The board's going to do what
Yep.
they can, I understand that.
I would think that it wouldn't be unlikely that we would reduce that number by half, and so therefore, we wouldn't necessarily make a $900,000 contribution to the medical fund, but maybe we'd be making that amount minus $180,000 or $150,000, which we have met with our benefits consultant. We've gone through what is in that medical account. We don't believe that we are shorting ourselves in any way. The account is in significant surplus. I know that we had apprised Mr. Hoey and we had apprised you. It was a choice earlier in the year about whether or not we come back for a special appropriation or whether we use that final payment into the account as the way to make sure that we will balance the book this year.
At this point, we're going to see where it ends up.
Yep.
And then talk about it and discuss it from there.
I do want to note that the budget that we passed in April includes corrections in the tuition line for the shortfalls that we are experiencing this year.
Understood. Yeah.
So along that same line, the 250,000 that's encumbered in the upkeep line, I don't think that was mentioned. Yeah, are you assuming that that's going to be used then? Or is there still some play in that number as well?
Yeah, I did. I alluded to it. I didn't. Yeah, it's in the upkeep line. There's 327 in the encumbrances altogether in purchase services.
Okay.
But right, the line item itself. Usually every month I'm like, okay, how are those encumbrances coming?
Right. So items like maintenance and upkeep, site improvement line. So once again this year, as we made it to about the midpoint of the year, Mr. Gurnham was put on notice to do essential and absolutely necessary repairs, but things that might be general maintenance or upkeep are things that we were waiting until we get a better handle on where we'll be closing the books. Our goal is to make as much of that medical payment as we can possibly make.
Capital equipment instructional. There's still 117 in encumbrance. I'm assuming that's going to be spent.
Well, those were equipment purchases that we're
instructional.
holding, right? So
Right.
those are, again, if those are absolutely necessary, so I know that I have approved some equipment purchases that were absolutely essential for some special educational instructional components. But if, for instance, it was a musical instrument at the high school that is getting old and we were going to purchase it this year, we're probably holding that and waiting to see what the end of the year brings, whether we purchase that instrument this year or hold it for a future year. Principals are putting through items that they are seeing as necessary at this time.
I thought that was I guess I was mistaken. I thought that was the technology lease. That wasn't the technology lease that we're obligated to keep.
The technology lease would have been...
That's not part of the, that's not the technology.
No, that's not
Okay.
one that we're holding back. That was
Okay.
one that we would have spent out.
Okay.
Yeah, because the equipment instructional is a $568,000 budget with 117. It's actually 118 left.
And not completely unusual for us to...
Encumbered. I'm sorry, encumbered. Thank you.
It's not completely unusual for us to sort of buy that out in sort of two waves. The items that we would buy over the summer early on because it's pieces that we need for instruction moving in, and then not unusual for us to hold some of those till late in the school year. Remember, while the number is slightly larger than it has been in past years, we have been over budget in tuition for 7 of the last 8 years. So it's not unusual for us to hold some of those equipment purchases until late into the year until we know where line items are going to fall out.
And this year, how much of an increase did we budget for in tuition over last year?
600.
It was significant.
600.
Again, Linda would be able to have the number at the top of her head. I don't have it. I can get that number to
I
you.
know we've been disappointed that.
Yeah, no,
we've gone over.
it was about $600,000.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Correctly, yeah. Plus or minus a little bit.
What is the other category? I'm looking here at purchase services. You have a category called Other that has spent about 93% of its budget. What's in there?
Other contracts.
Oh, other
Other contracted services.
Yeah.
Ken, that could sort of be just about anything. It's any time that we're going to bring somebody in. So it might be if we brought in a speaker. It might be any time we contracted a service in. Again, I'm just struggling for an example right now. They tend to be small dollar and they would tend to be miscellaneous in nature.
It's small dollars.
Usually we have the descriptions every year in the budget, but yeah. we get them that time and then we don't see them again. So then we forget.
I don't want to be repetitive, but again, this memo from Linda on May 13th references energy performance contract with Johnson. When do you expect to get any kind of number back on that?
We're not expecting until into the summer, but we did meet with Johnson Controls and with ECG at our last operations meeting, and they did share with us, we were concerned about the numbers that were coming in, and we asked to look at those numbers. They didn't seem to us to be what we were anticipating, and so in fact, what you will see in your next set of minutes is that we looked back, and what we discovered was that 3 of our elementary schools are of roughly the same size. Lakes, Leet and Cox are roughly the same size. Mr. Gurnham and we have been for years wondering what's happening at Lakes and Leet that we can't see the numbers, the energy numbers that we've been seeing at Cox. Johnson Controls came back to us and showed us modeling of the Cox energy use back to about 2014, and it shows that there are some anomalies in the way that we've been paying for energy. The quick summary is, the quick summary is that it's a flat energy draw across the whole school year. We're not seeing fluctuations in that energy draw based on calendar months. And in both of the other buildings, we do. We see that the energy draw spikes in the winter months and then drops off again as the weather warms. And so we believe that it may not have been what we were failing to do in the 2 other schools, but that Cox was an anomaly. And now that we have completely replaced the system, including new metering, it is now modeling like the other 2 buildings. And so we saw a spike in the winter months of this year. We thought that was unusual to see a spike in the energy draw after doing the performance contracting work. It's not unusual to see a spike in the winter months, however. So we have asked Jeff D'Onofrio to take a look at some of the numbers in our contract with the performance group. Mr. Gurnham is looking back at our energy billing over the last several years, but we are adjusting moving forward because of that anomaly.
And the important thing is that everybody's on top of it. All these different factions are on top of it. And I did find, it was in the operations committee meeting of April 8th, that actually Dr. Hirsch had brought up that there was a deficit in, that was just the overall. And then he said heating and electricity are not generating the savings that were anticipated from the energy performance contract. And then later on in that meeting, Mr. Gurnham spoke about that contract and said Mr. Gurnham noted that improving the control measures will hopefully help control energy usage.
Also,
so it seemed to be that not, and we've been reading that there's solar and controls and things that haven't quite gotten to that point and been punched out yet. So once they are, then they'll be performing the way they should. But
there's that, we're looking at the historical anomaly. There's that we don't have the whole project online. There's also a billing piece that is just interesting to note for you. We are paying the lease portion of the performance contract now, and as we make the lease payments, we should be seeing savings in the energy. We are making the lease payments out of the electrical line, so we budgeted electrical and we budgeted for heating oil. The savings are occurring in both of those lines, but the cost for the lease is only occurring in the electrical line. So to get a better sense of where we are, you would want to look at those 2 lines combined. For some reason, we carry heating under materials, but that's where heating, so the heating oil, you want to look at the electrical and the heating together, and it gives you a slightly better sense, still impacted by the fact that we don't have everything online. We'll have a better sense moving into the summer, and in fact, we'll have a better sense this time next year after we've had a full year of all the work done. We were doing bits and pieces of this project as the schools were opening, the school year was beginning, and we were moving into colder months.
I have a question. Do we have any kind of back-of-the-envelope calculations that are showing us that electric and oil is running similar to last year, but with the lease payment? That kind of would be an expectation I would have.
I want to say yes, but I'm cautious again because everything just isn't online. And there were, if you recall the beginning of the school year, there were a number of heating and cooling issues. We had contractors who were on site in multiple schools. I do want to note that anytime we experienced heating and cooling issues and needed to call in contractors, if it was a piece of work that JCI had been working on, we have passed through the cost of that to them, so they have been absorbing that. Mr. Gurnham has been diligent watching the bills, and if it's
it should be allocated detailed.
Right. If it's a control system that they were working on, and then we had trouble getting the air conditioning up and running on a hot day and needed to call out an air conditioning contractor, those bills did pass through, and they have been picked up by the contract.
Now, I apologize that I can't remember the specifics, but I think we keep asking you some questions about this. I think ECG is responsible for some type of measurement for the first 2 years of the the EPC,
With a guaranteed return.
and then we're going to get a guaranteed return. So is that forthcoming? Is there like a date that we know they're going to provide that for us?
And again, that would be after, so the early summer, we should begin to see some of the early returns, and it would probably be late summer to beginning of next school year that I think they'd be able to make their first full measure.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking, so when does the 2 years, when does the 2 years click in? It's like a project being substantially complete. So when is their 2 years?
We've actually
two-year
asked
clock
Jeff to go
tick?
back and take a look at the timing of the contract for us, so Jeff D'Onofrio.
So that's part of that contract review?
Yes, we're asking, Cliff has reached out to Jeff to ask him to clarify that for our operations committee as well.
Maybe we should have them make a report to the Board of Finance.
There are town components to the project as well. The school is probably 80% of the work, but there are town components built in. I would be specific in your request. We asked if somebody could come, and they sent about 10 people to our meeting. So I would just be specific in your request, what you're looking for.
Would you be looking for ECG to come, or to just have Cliff do a report?
Just have Cliff
Yeah.
do
I'm sure he'd be happy to, yeah.
Yeah,
Cliff
that's
would
not
be
a
happy
problem,
to.
but he needs to be able to have the information to report to us. So when he does have that, then we're meeting every month, so we should probably just, when he feels he's ready, that he can make that presentation and talk to us, then we just put it on the agenda and talk to him the next month.
Our board was asking all of these same questions
I'm
just
sure
a
they were.
couple weeks ago, and the answer was we need a little bit more time to get
Yep.
everything up and running, and then to get some time behind the project.
Yep.
So we are making lease payments as pieces come on board. We are seeing some reductions in both lines, but it's hard to get our arms around all of the numbers right now, as it's still a work in progress.
I'd like to throw out maybe one more question about this. So, generally, I'd be concerned then with ECG forthcoming with this report and this measurement that's really going to show us if we're getting the energy savings we expected, and if not, we're due a guarantee, which is very good news
Right.
from Johnson Controls. So I think the concern would be after their 2 years are up doing this kind of measurement. Is that something that we need to be able to take on ourselves? Maybe it's a good question for Cliff.
It's a good question.
Or are we going to need to continue to contract with ECG to do the measuring, especially if we come up short and we need to exercise the guarantee? But obviously, we're looking towards the guarantee, and that was the beauty of the
Performance guarantee is not from ECG, it's from Johnson Control.
right. But ECG does the measurement.
ECG is the owner's rep that works on our behalf to ensure that we're getting what we're supposed to get from Johnson Controls.
Right.
And that guarantee is longer than the 2 years. It's the life of the contract. But what you need to understand is it presupposes a 3% energy increase on an annualized basis. So there will be years where that works to our favor, and there will be years where it doesn't necessarily work to our favor.
It's not a one-time payment, it's in there, but it.
So I understand the guarantee is for the life of the
Right.
contract, but my concern is without the measurement, are we able to tell Johnson Control that, hey, we didn't get the energy savings we expected, we need to exercise our,
One of the challenges is we
Yep.
didn't have a compendium of
Documents and information relative to the multiple accounts that dated back a couple of years, which is the look-back period that Johnson Control has to show our true cost against the new cost. So that documentation is being put together. It requires work with Eversource. ECG has brought on a partner who is going to make, it's all electronic, it's all software-based, and now they're doing the data feeds to backfeed from Eversource all of our accounts into this new system. So once we have a baseline, it gets a lot easier for us to take it, to do the evaluation as to whether or not we're realizing the savings.
And the cost for preparing the baseline is included in
ECG's cost. No additional cost in the town.
so Mr. Selectman, am I right in gathering from your comments that by getting this baseline, this may enable us to do our own measurement after ECG is done with their 2-year contract?
If they export it in a file, we probably can, and I'll give it to Ken, because I know he knows how to work those comma delimited files. The be a pure data dump.
Okay, and obviously, these questions do extend, from the BOE to the BOS and across the town
And
and the
just
school.
while we're on the energy thing, right now, we're in
Yeah.
the process of finishing up our last project. I think it's our last project on the town side, which was the purchase of the streetlights. So we're in the middle of that process right now. So, in fact, we had a meeting, I believe, over at the Central Office North last week with the folks from Johnson Controls, and we are moving forward. We've made the purchase arrangements with Eversource to buy those lights.
I think on the school side, most of the work is complete. There is some of the control work that needed to go back and be cleaned up and be redone. There is a fuel feed on one set of boilers that needs to be redone, and beyond that, there may be some solar work, but most of the work is completed on the school side. Some of those are some big pieces, but once those are completed, we'll have all our work done as well.
So just another question in my mind, too. We're making the lease payments already, right? So even though we only have the project partially completed, so that would maybe raise some questions if ECG found that we weren't getting the energy savings we had. They might say, well, we weren't completed with the project, yet we're making a full lease payment.
Some of the conversation we had about how that nets out, it was
Yeah.
one of the reasons we asked Jeff to go back and look at
We're
the,
making lease payments
Based on what we've drawn down as the project moves through its life cycle.
Oh, are they partial lease payments?
Yes.
Ah, understood.
Just real quick to go back to the streetlights, just, is all the work done on the replacement of the?
Hasn't even started.
Hasn't started yet, right?
Right.
Is that gonna be done before we purchase? Is that all, is the
No.
work, or we're gonna purchase and then do
We
the
purchased,
replacement?
in order for us to change the lights,
Okay.
we have to own them.
Okay,
Eversource is funny about that.
darn utilities. Okay. Anything else?
I think
The
we beat
minutes,
that one up a little bit.
operations, Yeah.
Okay.
Warrants.
Just wanted to make a comment on
Veronica.
the Board of Ed operations minutes. We just went through the budget cycle, and there was a lot of talk about whether we collectively look for efficiencies. And there's a mention in the minutes about Mr. Bloss is asked specifically about partnering with other towns to gain cost savings. So I just wanted to point that out, that, we do look at it all the time as a way to find efficiencies. So I just thought I'd comment on, so the public would be aware that it's not just at budget time. We really do look at this stuff year-round.
Mr. Scanziano has been meeting with other directors of special education, again, to talk about seats and services that we may be able to provide, either for tuition that comes directly to us or for in-kind service when we have a student who could benefit from some seat and service that they have available.
This was in relation to health insurance,
Yep.
So
We've taled about those as
good.
well. Yeah, we collaborate with neighbors quite a bit.
Tuition, we definitely have, but yeah, to call out the medical claims and partnering there.
Two of our
with the
biggest
consultant.
collaborative arrangements are with Madison and Clinton around 18 to 21-year-old services for students with special needs. And then we also collaborate on all of the adult education that we're required to provide to the community as well. We do that through a collaborative with Branford, North Branford, and Clinton as well.
Anything else for?
How many Guilford residents are served by that?
Oh, that's a good question, Ken. They give me figures every year. Adult education services offer citizenship courses, they offer English classes, they offer GED courses, they offer continuing education courses, and alternative high school degree courses. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many residents we had participating in all of those services this year. I do get a report annually. I can look and have it forwarded to you.
I'd like to see that.
And given the partnership, those residents may not be going to classes at Guilford Public Schools. They may be going at other schools.
Some of the classes are hosted at Adams Middle School in the evenings, but the vast majority are housed at Branford High School. And one of the reasons there is because we do have the public transportation that runs on Route 1, and so that works as a good location for us. Most of the services are offered out of Branford High School in the evenings.
And by public transportation, you mean Connecticut transportation, not town of Guilford
No,
public
Connecticut transportation, yes. We do not provide transportation for adult services. No, it's the bus.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
OEL warrants?
Sure.
Okay. I think I saw it in the minutes, but I don't understand it. What is the college internship program? I see that we authorized about $6,600 for March for one tuition.
It's a slightly inaccurately named special education service that we provide. So we have some of our special education students, it's a vocational program. The labeling of that is a little bit misleading, but it's a vocational opportunity that we provide for some of our older special education students.
But is it correct that in March of 19, there was one tuition for $6,600?
But I'm sure that's correct, but I'd be cautious about the billing cycle. I don't think that that necessarily means it was for the month of March only. That could be for multiple
That's when it got
months. Yeah, I'm not
authorized,
sure
yeah.
what the billing cycle is on that, Ken.
Okay.
I won. There's,
Jeff?
on page 7, there's an item for National Center for Improvement of, and then it got cut off. It was $9,900 for district PD meetings 1 through 4. I was just wondering.
PD is usually professional development, right? So National Center, yes, National Center for Improvement of.
I would have to.
Kind
go
of
back.
towards the bottom of the,
National Center for Improvement of what?
I can go back and check. That might be in reference to the Center for Assessment. They are a group out of New Hampshire. They're a nationally recognized group. We have been doing some work with that organization around task design and assessment design, specifically targeting the next generation science standards. And they've been working with science teachers at both Adams and at the high school. The billing that they're billing us is fraction of what the relationship should be costing, but this is a group that wants to work with Guilford Public Schools. So we're bringing in about an $80,000 contract for about $10,000 because they want to bring their work and they want to work with our teachers here in Guilford. I believe that's the Center for Assessment.
great, thank you.
Is there a number on that? 21921. I'll have Linda confirm.
21921, that's right.
And it's the 1 to 4. They began work with us. They did some work with our leadership team over the summer at a summer retreat, but they began working with teaching staff, I think, in January. They were back in March. They're again later this week, and then they're working for 3 or 4 days right at the close of school with those teachers as well. So it's an extended relationship. It's not just they come in for 1 day and do a presentation. And the idea of working with Adams first, and it's the Adams teachers and the department chair from the high school, because once we complete the work at the middle school, we expect to roll some of those same strategies up into the high school science instruction.
And is the plan to continue with the same group next year also, or is this kind of a one-off for it?
We would continue with their group, but their involvement would probably begin to tail off. There's a train the instructor component to this, and so as they're in helping us with task design for some anchor units that we do at each grade level, they wouldn't stay on indefinitely. So we would probably have them continue with the high school teachers next year, but probably for fewer days, and then they would tail off completely after that.
Great, thank you.
I got a question on one warrant.
Go ahead.
It was on page 9, and it was for specialty transportation, and I just kind of questioned it because it was just pretty large. It was $222,845. Does that sound right? It was somewhere near in the middle of the page
For
there.
a bunch of different,
Yeah.
it's for a bunch of different schools.
Mercy,
Sound,
vinyl,
Mercy, just vinyl, it's all the,
Okay.
That's a multi-million-dollar line item over the course of the school
Yeah.
year. So again, I'm sure that they are lumping together a number of pieces. We do run transportation to the VOAG schools. We do run transportation.
it looks like Our Lady of Mercy's in there.
Yep, so, it's,
Sunday.
bless you.
Was that wasn't for just a month, was it?
No, I'm sure it's not,
Okay.
Jonathan. Again, there's no way that we would have a monthly transportation bill for specific transportation that large.
Okay.
It's going to be a number of items that are lumped together
It's
that
like the
were.
February bill.
It does say March
It
2019.
does say that.
Unless it is the monthly payout for the base transportation and those other items were lumped in there, again, I'm going to need to defer to Linda.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was a big one.
I told you, you're getting the pinch hitter tonight.
Yeah,
So that's
the one
item.
question I would have had, I know that they've been in the past a little delayed.
Yes.
And there were an awful lot of, there were
There were a lot of
4 or
catch-up payments,
5
correct.
pages of payments here that go back to literally September.
Yes, there were a lot of
Is-
catch-up payments.
Is that, I don't remember, is that typical? That many? I know sometimes they miss a couple and you get a few stragglers.
Well, so we were with
But-
STA for 8 years, and so this is the first time that we've worked with specialty. It's the first year of our relationship
so you're
with them.
getting to
We're
know how they-
getting to know this new vendor, and again, we were one of the first full districts that they had picked up. They had been doing a lot of special education transportation. They did land a Hartford contract before we came on board, so they do have Hartford public schools. But they are a growing company, and the relationship with us is brand new. So I just can't say if this is typical. It's not the way we have done it in the past,
Yeah.
but we're working out our relationship
I
and our
would just
procedures
question
with
it in
them.
terms of efficiencies and process, as long as they don't go over the budget.
That was in
that's-
March?
That's fine, but
You're also going to see lots of individual
Paperwork, just all
bills
of
to them, lots of individual athletic transportation
There's a-
bills
yeah.
that in the past we have clustered together.
Yep.
Linda has met with them, and those are going to begin to be lumped together and billed in clusters as we did with the previous vendor.
it's an awful lot of checks to cut.
Yeah, so we're working some of those items out as we get to the close of our first year together.
I'm sure Linda was on that, yeah. Okay,
I got one more oddball one, sorry.
go ahead.
This might be for Linda too.
Okay. Well, let's just agree that it's for Linda and move on.
Don't take it the wrong way.
It was page 13, and it was somewhere near the bottom. And it's actually to the state of Connecticut, but what surprised me is it was for internet. January through March 2019, Guilford High School internet. And I was wondering why we pay the state of Connecticut maybe $2,000 a quarter?
Because some years ago, when CEN just rolled out, the state of Connecticut took on they were pumping internet into every high school in the state of Connecticut, and it was done at a state level. They pumped it out. It was a good deal at the time, and so that they are our vendor for that service. That's going to be more of a Linda, Kevin Mitchell question, but it's where we get the service from.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A couple of years
Go
ago,
to the
expert in the room.
the legislature decided that CEN needed to be a profit-making venture as opposed to a subsidized benefit to the 169 school districts in the state of Connecticut. So they are now charging for internet bandwidth, and that's why that fee is there. It was at one point built, was completely free. I think it was a gig's worth of internet to every high school,
Right.
every school district, whether depending on where it terminated. But they were charged. The Department of Information Technology was charged with making this a for-profit entity.
Do we have to buy from them?
No, but their rates are. When I was last looking at this stuff, their rates were the most competitive.
Should have remembered we had an expert in the room.
Anything else for Dr. Freeman or for Mary?
I have a general question.
Okay.
In making these moves to cover the shortfalls, how can we find $300,000 in teacher salaries? Where do we find that?
That was listed in here.
Yeah, so there's going to be a number of places. There's going to be positions that we may have chosen not to fill. I'm not sure what Linda, I noted. There's going to be positions that came in as less expensive than we had originally budgeted.
Just a general
There's
under
no
budget?
there's no detail, it just says due to restructuring or
Right.
changes in staffing.
Okay.
So-
A lot of it's going to have to do with whether somebody leaves and we refill with a less expensive position. We have been very careful about if we have a vacancy, does it need to be filled immediately? Salary tends to be the line that is there that can be used to offset tuition. I have noted for this board the last several years that the more aggressive we become in taking retirement savings up front and not carrying those sorts of unknowns into the school year, the tighter and tighter that line is going to be. And the years that we end up coming short in both tuition and salaries are going to be years that we would then end up coming here for asking for a mid-year appropriation. So it's just the idea that it's difficult to budget that accurately for that. It's our single largest expenditure, and so there's always going to be a little bit of movement in that
I
line.
noticed that for the longest while, we were inquiring about the number of retirements pending, and for the longest while, it was 3. Now it's 6. Is it going any higher?
There always tend to be some notices at the end of the school year. We have had a small number, we've had 2 or 3 at the end of this year that aren't retirements, but they are people who are relocating or they're resigning for a number of different reasons. And so, yeah, it is slightly higher than it was when we met with you last. But if those are people resigning early or mid-career, you might see some savings, but you won't see the same savings that you would for somebody leaving at a retirement from Top Step.
And it also depends on the area
Yeah.
that they teach.
That's very important. It does depend on the certification area. When we see people leave in English language arts, social studies, elementary certifications, we will likely recognize a savings. If we see people leave in science, math, special education, or particularly world language, it is less likely that we would recognize a savings, as those are all shortage areas.
Okay.
All right, anything further now? Before we
I'll be surprised every month.
vote? Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of April 2019 in the amount of $4,470,625.36?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, review and approve expenditures for the town government for April 2019.
Mr. Chairman, as we transition, I know
Please.
we probably will coordinate this in the upcoming minutes, but relative to the energy performance stuff.
Yes.
Take a look at the utility and fuel line items in the various buildings.
That, for which that is a line item, departments. And you're going to see that most of the departments are in the mid-60s in terms of percentage expended on utilities and fuel, which is a direct correlation to the energy efficiency things that we have implemented.
Good, yeah, thank you.
That's positive.
It did, yeah.
It downloaded.
How do you know?
I don't know.
We'll plant a couple trees.
Hard copy.
That's what you do.
It did download?
It did. Go back, hit the
Refresh.
refresh. And then,
Okay,
yeah.
very well, thank you. All right, Sandy O'Freddy, welcome. It's your show now.
It's my show. Okay. The town's revenue. The revenue overall is at 101% collected, just slightly higher than our total last year at this time of 100.1. Golf revenues are down due to our rainy spring. The greens fees, cart rentals, and concessions are all affected by the rainy weather. The fire department is right on track with 87% already collected. Park and Rec is also on track for the year, since May and June are typically high months for beach-related revenue. However, May has not had a good beach weather yet, so we may have to see how the effect of how that affects our bottom line. All of our ECS money is in. The town received $253,639 over what we budgeted. Included in the April figure is $39,066 of excess cost grant. It's a prior year adjustment that has been transferred to the Board of Ed in May. This is unfortunately much lower than the $133,000 that they anticipated. We are still expecting $64,000 from the state of Connecticut for the municipal grant and aid appropriation. This will not cover the $70,000 left to collect in that line item, but it will come very close. Interest income, tax collections, and ECS amounted for the majority of the $1.3 million anticipated revenue surplus at year end.
So we're So so in terms of the revenue surplus, we're where we were last month. I think it was $1 million. $1 million,
Million.
right, so.
A little over $1 million,
So
yes.
we're tracking that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions on revenues? I think you got
Golf took a dive from last year.
golf and park and rec, I mean,
I don't think it's just the spring. I think that if you look at the golf, the annual memberships are way down, it looks like. I would think that you've already collected, anybody who's gonna do an annual membership has probably already knocked on the door.
Unless they're going to buy them for kids, would use them more in the summertime, but you're right, Ken. I don't expect a significant increase there.
It's gonna be,
Right. And as a follow-up to the conversations we had during budget season, I've started preliminary discussions with the Golf Course Commission, Park and Rec Commission, as well as Town Hall representative to start to evaluate the efficacy of continuing to operate in the manner that we have.
in the manner that we have.
Correct.
Right.
okay.
Okay.
We've collected more than the expected amount of Board of Education money, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why was that? Was that because we budgeted conservatively last go-around?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah. And we, and,
We've done that 3 years in a row, underestimated the impact, or overestimated the impact.
and we may have done it again.
That's right.
But I'll touch on that
Okay.
later on.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned.
I'll touch on that for you.
Right?
It's not that much, but it's, I think it was a wise move.
It's nothing to sneeze at.
Better than not getting it, 300. But yeah, we'll touch on that
Right.
a bit.
Right, let's not forget that our legislative delegation last year made sure that we got nowhere near the cuts to ECS that we had anticipated.
Yeah, no, it's good news. It's good news. Okay. If nothing else on revenues? Expenditures?
Expenditures.
Yes.
The insurance line will not be overdrawn once year-end transfers from the waste transfer station and the library are received. Approximately $58,000 was received in May already. As reported in prior months, the legal department is expected to go over budget due to general legal expenses and assessment and reval claims. The building department is over budget due to the contracted services line item, which is offset by additional revenue in that department, which is currently showing a surplus of $86,000. The fire department is waiting the reimbursement from the SAFER grant for the last quarter. With this grant offset, the department will be closer to the 83% expended it should be at this time. The reimbursements are always a quarter behind. Public Works budget has some overages on the salary line item due to storm-related overtime. However, they are tracking almost exactly where they were last year, and they did not overexpend their bottom line last year. Encumbrances that are not needed will be canceled at year end, and hopefully putting the funds back into some of the line items. The capital account is currently overspent by $98,000. Transfers from reserve fund balance accounts will offset the technology overage, and there is an anticipated grant to offset the police overage. The first payment for the energy performance lease was paid through capital, but will be transferred to the debt budget as was determined through the fiscal '20 budget process. As noted in prior months, the overage and debt interest will be offset by premiums being held in reserve for fund balance. Overall, our expenditures are only slightly higher than they were last year at this time. It is anticipated that there will only be a small surplus in the expenditure side by year end, less than $100,000. This does not include any overages that the Board of Education may incur.
Sandra, I'm sorry, did you touch on engineering and I missed it?
No,
Okay.
building,
Just-
Yeah,
They-
building public works.
of Public Works,
That's what you talked
yeah.
about.
Okay, you explain why they had the surplus, I'm sorry, I missed it.
They're a little, their salary lines are over, but They do purchase orders, and so once they, at the end of the year, they'll cancel those out, and that'll usually end up going back into the lines that are a little bit over.
Okay.
Jonathan, were you talking about building or public works?
I was talking about engineering, 110. We're on expenditures here?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hold on.
which is 55% expended.
You may be looking at building below it.
No, I was looking at engineering and wondering why they're only 55% expended. But it's okay.
I know we have, there's savings in the salary line
Right.
too, because we replaced Jim with new
okay.
engine. All right.
And
Not
it's zero,
proficient
it's
with
zero
that.
because you got split.
All right, how come I can't?
Did I jinx that thing on you? Is that the one I?
No, it's not. But I've been having trouble with it all night, so anyway, all right.
Yeah, that's what it is, it's the split.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what's going on with
Yeah, that's all definitely Jonathan in full, salary.
Yep.
So. That makes sense.
that. You can look at this one if you want.
It's all right. I got my paper copy.
Okay.
Any questions?
Ken, you said you
Yeah, I had a question on the fire department, on expenditures. I noticed if you look at the detail, that there are 3 categories that are sharply over. Overtime, building maintenance, and operating supplies.
131.
Can you get some explanation from the chief on those?
Hold on, Ken.
I'm having a board pack issue.
Building maintenance.
What was the question? Another question?
the expenditures in overtime, well, building maintenance, and what was the other one, Ken? Just make sure I get it right.
Supplies, operating supplies.
Operating supplies. Got one.
The biggest is in building maintenance.
Well,
the
there-
largest.
well, there's a few that are, I mean, vehicle maintenance is,
Mm-hmm.
Not a big budget line at the beginning.
no.
172.
I'll have to look into
I
it.
mean, the supplies can sometimes be because things expire and they can't use them. So they have, I'm
Well,
just
that's in-
guessing, but-
That's also including encumbrances. So, my question on operating supplies would be, how much of the encumbrances might be just held until the end, because they're not going to be needed for that reason?
Right.
Is that they don't need to replace
Yeah.
some of the,
And
the
sometimes
items.
the bills come through that don't have the purchase order
Right.
referenced on it, so well, I'll check into that too.
There's $22,000 in encumbrance for operating supplies, so that might offset the shortage.
Yeah, in that
That's-
line.
That's what it does, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Overtime, on the overtime, I mean, I know we addressed the overtime issue in next year's budget.
Which department, Mike?
And fire, we're
Fire.
still on fire. That was one of the questions that Ken had, is overtime was tracking higher. I'll be darned if I can remember why the overtime was tracking higher, but we had corrected it for the budget for next year. Make sure we accommodated that. Matt, do you recall?
The SAFER grant will offset some of that.
The sa- is
and
that-
we have not received yet.
Okay, so it's going to offset the overtime?
Yes.
Line item?
Yes.
Okay. I know you said that, I didn't realize it was overtime.
Won't it offset salaries
It will
too?
offset, I believe it's it's,
Salaries and replacement salaries.
yeah.
Because salaries is gonna be over without the SAFER grant. You got basically 240, you got another 480, and you only have 425 left, so that's gonna run 50 over, but I'm sure the SAFER grant will cover that.
But there is a whole breakdown of different lines it hits. Primarily, it is the full-time salary.
Okay.
But there'll be some other,
All right.
Okay.
And I think when they explained it too, if they're on a call, they can't just leave the call, so it does go into their overtime line item.
Yeah, so, actually now it's starting to come back to me, is that
Yeah.
there was an inordinate amount of calls that were coming in this year, and this is why the budget for next year accommodated that there were more calls. And there was a chart that was given to
Yeah,
us,
if it's
so.
over their shift, if it's a 12-hour
Right.
shift and they go over,
And the
it
police
starts
is
to go
over the
into their
same piece.
overtime. Yeah.
At the end of the day, fire will meet the budget.
Yes.
Don't meet it. And the grant's coming, so. Anything else on the expenditures? What do I have here, 10? Oh, nope. 1. I have nothing else on expenditures. Should we go to warrants? So, I have a question on the warrants, on the special fund weekly warrants. Special fund, and sometimes I look at these and I go, I probably am wondering if I should know the answer to this after a number of years, but there seemed to be a lot, I stopped marking them, there seemed to be a lot of items on senior trips, senior meals, and I have, just make sure it's clear, I have nothing against those expenses, but it seemed like a lot to all hit in one month. And they're all different. Guilford Senior City Line Distributor seems to be, food and travel related, and there were a lot of them. And I'm just wondering why the amount, because I went back 5 months, and there was hardly anything, and then all of a sudden they hit this month. I don't know if was that typical that they all hit. I'm sure it'll meet whatever the budget amount is, but it just seemed like there was a lot all in 1 month.
Trips, meals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of the trips, they do them in this, the
And
spring.
I'm all for meals and trips, don't get me wrong, I just was wondering why it all hit now and wasn't spread out more over the year. That's my only question on it.
You're not questioning the
I
Glenn
can
Campbell
double check.
experience.
No, I would go see Glenn Campbell too and see this.
Trips a month.
Right,
Right.
but why there hasn't been anything in 5 months, really under that, and then all of a sudden, they all hit, was it because April was a really big month for trips and food? I don't know, I would have thought it was more spread out over the year.
Maybe it's when they
But
got invoiced for.
And it could be just that, it could just be an anomaly, right? But I just thought it was odd, I loved seeing it, but it was just odd that it all hit.
I know Terry Holland Buckley does quarterly, reconciles all her seniors, so whether that has something to do with why they're coming in April, but I do believe there was several their bigger trips are this time of year.
It could just be a timing issue, that's fine.
There were.
I will look.
If you could
I
just.
see what you mean, Mike, there's quite a
Yeah,
few.
if you could just find out why, that's all. I was looking at them, I started wishing I was a senior.
Maybe you're just jealous they're having a better time than
You're
you.
getting closer every day.
I'm getting closer every day, I don't have to worry about that, right? There's a lot of good
If
trips
we
on there.
started eating in April.
There you
I
go.
had a question, not so much about the amounts, but if we could get an update as to where we are with our friends of the Department of Energy and Environmental
I was just
Protection.
about to ask that question. This is $652.
Yes.
That you can share with us. I know that there's.
On Thursday, Janice Plasiak, our town engineer, and the Malone McBroom, our consultant Megan Raymond from Malone McBroom, are meeting with 2 representatives from DEEP on a mitigation project that we have identified that would benefit the Guilford shoreline. I won't go into any more than that at this point. And the meeting is to determine whether or not DEP would consider that appropriate mitigation for the multiple notices of violations that we had. There was a restoration ratio, 5 to 1, on areas that you have damaged, and we feel that this satisfies that 5 to 1 ratio.
So 5 to the good versus the 1 to the bad.
Correct.
But that
So-
really doesn't, this is a marsh restoration project we're
Yeah.
referring to?
Yeah, it is.
But it's still in the early stages, hasn't started yet.
Has not started yet. Yeah, we need to get their sign off and approval. Once that happens, then the consent order will be signed, and then we move forward from there. So,
And has the reception from Deep been favorable so far?
well, we don't know on this
Okay.
particular program. They're coming out to meet with our staff, as I said, on Thursday,
Yeah.
to review it. This fits. It's consistent with Deep's mitigation projects that they've approved in the past, ones that Janice has worked on in Branford, and Megan Raymond from McMullen Broom has worked with DEP on for other municipalities. So,
So it's
we're hopeful.
in the early stages, though.
No, it's more than early stages
Okay.
at this point. We already had another representative from DEP out here who would actually oversee and do the work, design the project. So our thought here is we have one division of DEEP who we've engaged to work with us on designing this project. Now we need to get the other division of DEEP to say, yeah, that'll work. So.
And then, once we take care of Deep, are we running on a parallel
Well,
track
we
with
still-
the Army Corps?
Yeah,
or-
that's exactly it. This idea has been floated to the Army Corps, the individual from the Army Corps who we've been working with, and actually by Megan Raymond when they were on another site visit in West Haven on issues similar to ours, and she seemed to be on board with this as satisfactory.
Great.
Anything else on special fund? I do have one.
I have one.
I know exactly what it's for, Castle Booze, GHS, new construction,
Which is this?
special fund.
Special fund warrants.
Synthetic turf service, $900. Again, I feel I should know this, but is the money that,
Castle Booze is overseas.
that's Castle Booze overseeing the
Overseeing the
synthetic?
construction project.
Is that coming out of the GHS bond?
No.
No. And that's done, right? I
We,
mean, that-
and you have appropriated additional amounts of money for Castle Booze to manage this process on our behalf. That was done a couple of months ago.
Okay. Because the funding source, it just said GHS new construction. Used to seeing that as part of the bond.
It's not coming out of.
It's not,
It is not coming out of a
it's
bond.
more of a confirmation that I wanted. Okay. Because that's done.
There's a special appropriation, you may
Okay.
recall. We had the original contract with Castle Booze.
Right.
We came back and asked for additional money,
Right.
and this is part of that.
And this is for their oversight over the.
That's for their,
The
being being our
reconstruction.
owner's rep, basically. for that.
Actually, there was design and oversight, both components.
And any update on the progress of that? It looked from the.
Yeah, if you haven't
from the
been,
building.
if you haven't been by there yet, there's a lot of green turf down there. That's it.
It's moving, I've heard it's moving very quickly.
It's moving very quickly. And the rationale for same is the fact that this is costing the contractors.
Okay.
So it's amazing
They're motivated.
what kind of motivation happens with that when it's their time. And they've been, there's been significant back and forth. By the way, we also picked up all the material, the stone that was on the original field. That has been removed and is now sitting up at our stockpile up at Baldwin for use. So we actually picked up some of this stone material that can be used in other projects going forward.
It won't be needed for the replacement field?
No.
Great.
Total replacement.
How are we on the Old Quarry Tuttle's Point project? Is it much left?
No, that's part of the notice of violation and the consent order with DEP.
Are you thinking Long Hill?
You think about the water main, Ken, or are you talking about the?
I was looking at the two $4,500 appropriations.
Yeah, those are the deep.
So that's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else on special fund? Before we go to weeklies?
I did look, I got my board pack back.
Yes.
On the senior trips.
Yes.
Those are all reimbursed by the seniors. So this is just showing we pay everything out and then they pay it back. There was a trip to Irington, there was the Music Man, there was a few different
Yeah.
things. So
So it just happened to be a timing.
Timing.
That There
It
were a
could
lot
just
of
be that
trips and
for-
programs, and then we paid out, and then it's going to come back.
Because not always do all the theaters have activities that they'll want to go to, and just so happens that in April, there were several.
There was, okay, so it's timing. Thank you.
Our region picked a popular choice.
Warrants, now that we have all of them? On weeklies or 520 warrant?
Warrant?
Yeah, kind of catching up on them now. Do you have any on warrants?
Not yet.
On your paper copy?
No.
Your hard copy? No? Okay. All right, well, we're looking at, we go to medical
Okay. April was our lowest month for claims.
in a long time.
Catastrophic claims have reached 1.3 million, only 34,000 shy of our individual stop-loss premium. Our estimated fund balance at June 30th is 5.1 million.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that? We'll probably be hitting the, we'll be hitting the premium amount
Yeah.
based on the numbers, but
Refresh my memory, how much did we transfer out of this for the BOE last year when they didn't make the payment and it came out of here, right?
it was the
Was it
full.
the full 900?
900,000.
Yeah, it was the full amount.
Just as a reminder, I know Dr. Freeman mentioned that the discussion that we had all had about this process, that everyone needs to be on the same page
Yes.
about
Yes.
not making payments to the fund, because that is a joint fund between the Board of Education and the town. So unilateral decisions, I think, we talked about this last year. It was unfair to make unilateral decisions in one board without incorporating the discussion with all three boards. So I think that was the precursor.
That was the precursor of what we didn't want to have happen last year. And we'll bring it up again, I'm sure, next couple months.
Correct.
Yeah.
Can you refresh my memory? I think there was a recommended level to have a surplus in the fund of maybe 2 months.
Yeah, 2 months is kind of 2 months at what level? A year ago at this time, we thought that level was going to be about, what was it, 14, almost 14 million a year. But what's our run rate right now? It's looking like it's around 13, right? So I think comfortably, if it's around $3 million, we're in good shape. I think the current projection, based on the month we just had, is 5.1. So there's an awful lot of money sitting there on the sidelines, if you will. I think you recall, I've made the suggestion that you consider the other post-employment benefits funding, as you did last year with the $200,000 that you put into OPEB, and this, with some of this kind of money, we could get a substantial head start on building a trust.
Also, a great opportunity to return money to taxpayers.
Jonathan, you and I will continue to say that's a one-time revenue event, which I would love to see you replicate next year.
I know it's a one-time event, but this will be year 2.
Well, you have the opportunity, when you set the budget, to ask the questions to determine whether or not the amount we're asking for medical expenses is appropriate. And if you want to take a shot at saying, well, we can anticipate another $1 million surplus in next year's operating budget, you have the right to do that. And therefore, you're turning the money back to taxpayers in the form of no taxation.
I like that
Less
idea.
taxation.
I did want to bring that up under old business, but
Certainly.
we'll touch on that then.
Yep.
Anything else on medical? No. Anything, last chance on warrants now that we have them. Anything else for Sandy at all? Okay. We're good? All right.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of April 2019, in the amount of $2,039,732.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Item number 6, receive and take action on tax collector's recommendation of uncollectibles to be transferred to the suspense list. Every year around this time, we get this memo from our tax collector. This is from Deb Milano, dated May 1st. I won't go through the details on this, but this is for Grand List 2015 for personal property, motor vehicle supplemental, items that basically the tax has not yet been paid and is uncollectible and should be transferred to suspense tax book. So the amount is, personal property is $14,283.67. Motor vehicle is $30,224.21, and motor vehicle supplemental is $8,349.87 for a total to transfer to suspense of $52,857.75. Do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Can I ask a question?
Further
before
discussion. Veronica.
What additional lengths do we go to collect this? Do we solicit, do we get a marshal? Are there?
I tend to remember this. This is a very good question that comes up every year. And one of my questions is, what if by chance you're going through all of this and you know of someone?
So they've already, that was my
Already-
point. They've already gone through a
the two-step
collection
process,
agency and
Okay.
we've done our due diligence.
But some of the people on this list still have assets in the town.
Yes, they do. Most of those,
So-
on the motor vehicle stuff,
So don't we have a lien on any of,
there will be also tax sales.
excuse me?
Tax sales, which you'll be seeing
Right,
shortly.
which we could do it.
You're going to be seeing those shortly. Most of these, most of the suspense stuff is motor vehicle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of those folks have either moved out of town, sold the vehicle, or are delinquent to the point where they're driving an unregistered car, and when they get caught, they have to pay their back taxes in order to get their, not their license, their registration up to date.
So do we know, based on historical data, what percentage of this number is ultimately collected?
Low, it's low. I don't have a number, but I can get that for you, a percentage.
So
Yeah.
eventually, if you just hold out long enough, you can keep living in the town, and you never.
No, they'll get caught eventually.
It'll come back to you at some point.
If the delinquency's on personal property, you couldn't lien real property,
We lien real estate property, that's it.
just real property.
Any further discussion?
Not until next year.
That's right. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Committee reports, item number 7, building permits. Any questions on building permits?
Slow.
Rain.
It's grim.
Yep. Okay, if nothing on that, item number 8, old business. We started the discussion last month about the OPEB trust, and I know we received a memo. We have a full board tonight. So, not that any decisions would be made, I just want to make sure that we go through the proper process when that time comes. I might have been last month a little premature, not to call it to a vote, but just to have a discussion about it. Do we need to have someone come in front of us in terms of a consultant? I had the memo here someplace. It was from, yes, Millman. I remember looking at, that had basically what the process was to set up a trust, which is something that I actually, Shipman and Goodwin, came from Richard Cohen
Right.
to Mary Jane, and I believe we received that. Well, this is from September 18th of 2018, this memo was dated, which talked about setting up a trust. I just want to make sure that we're all comfortable with the process and the procedures and what needs to be done.
Could I suggest before we bring someone from
I would-
Shipman and
would
Goodwin
love
at $250 an hour down here?
Yes.
To answer questions that you guys put together, a list of concerns, questions,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll formulate a presentation so that that time is well spent.
Okay.
Or we can get that information to you in advance, and if you still want to talk to someone from Shipman and Goodwin, that's, that's one of our legal firms that we utilize.
Okay.
So,
If you could just forward me a copy of that,
That was going to be my next question.
that would
Did
be
it-
helpful.
I don't know, this should have gone to the full board. If not, I have it. I'll send,
it's September, right?
it's
So-
September 18th of
We didn't
18.
get it
I may have
in
got, I don't
September.
remember, I don't remember.
I think we got it more recently than that. That's when it was
I thought we
dated.
did. I will make sure that it's forwarded to everybody, and then it has the clear steps of what needs to happen.
Right.
And then we could generate questions from that.
I think the steps are almost secondary to the conversation, which is this something we want to do? Do we want to continue to go on a pay-as-you-go basis, or do we want to take some surplus funds, start to build a trust, literally build a trust, like a pension fund, in order to grow that revenue so that we aren't having to continue to rely on pay-as-you-go? Now, obviously, with $200,000 in there now, and let's say you were generous enough to throw another, $500,000 or $750,000 in there, or we were wild and get to $1 million, we're still not going to draw down on that for any amount of time, right, Bob? We're going to let that sit and invest.
Yeah, if I may, all the actuaries that we've been speaking with lately made a point to go out of their way to talk about OPEB. And I encourage you to write down any issues or ask Mary Jane or Mitch for the presentations we've just recently received to get textbook on this stuff without incurring too much time or money. But there are, in general, arguments for, but you can also easily draw a picture that says it's not really necessary to go that way. So I encourage this board to ask the questions that concern you, because will really have a bearing on the nature of the reply, the description you get.
Once you transfer the money over, is it a one-way trip, or you?
There are some legal hurdles to get it back out when you establish the trust. There are some precedents, and there are some codicils that are made, but I think it can be undone.
For a fee to the lawyer?
Written correctly with the ability to bring it back out.
But right now, whatever money we transfer, since we haven't created a trust, it's just
It's
sitting
in
in
a
an
dedicated
account
account
that we can take
that
back.
that you guys have control over eventually. You folks, I'm sorry. Sorry to be so gender specific.
Anything else on that? And I'll send that memo out, and we can discuss it further. Item number 9, the new business. Ultimately, I just wanted to give a stat, and Matt, feel free. I know that this came through. I was very appreciative that Representative Scanlon called me the morning that all this was going on, but when the proposed budget went forward from the Appropriations Committee. So where we stand in terms of how it would affect our budget, we had estimated 50% of the ECS cuts, and as some of us know, the teacher's retirement came off the table, at least for this particular run. It looked like we were going to be getting about $93,000 more than we had anticipated, which would be $259,000 start to next year. So we were conservative, and right now we're in better shape going into the fiscal year for 1920. Assuming it stands.
That's right.
Assuming it stands. But at that point.
There'll be some hijinks between now and June 6th.
Oh, 11th hour, yeah, there'll be 11th hour stuff that goes on, but again, it's positive, so. And I'm sure we'll have more at our next meeting in terms of where things end up, we hope, right? Anything else under new business? Item number 10, public forum. Anyone?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. First Selectman?
Whilst we're talking, I took the opportunity to open up the Guilford 55 active community calendar for the month of May, and you might be surprised that there are 6 trips for seniors in May.
So be expecting another run of
And
warrants?
actually, this is a shameless plug for the Park and Rec and the work we do on behalf of our seniors. On May 8th, they went to the Connecticut Science Center. On May 15th, they went to Goodspeed for the Music Man. On May 16th, there was a trip to Providence for a Little Italy tour. On May 22nd, there was a trip to the Shoreline Elder Care Alliance. Actually, that's going to be this Wednesday. This Thursday, for those who like Motown, there's a review in Cheshire. And then on Friday, May 31st, there's a lunch bunch at the Good News Cafe in Woodbury. So those are 6 trips that the seniors. So guess what? Next month, going to be a lot more out of the senior trips in that
Perfectly
fund.
fine. Perfectly.
But again, just a shameless plug for all the work that Terry Holland Buckley and her staff does at Park and Rec for our seniors.
Agreed. Okay. Our agenda's all set. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.